This is Autoline After Hours, unscripted, uncensored, unapproved. Are you a podcast kind of person? Then look for Autoline After Hours, wherever you go for your favorite podcast.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey, and by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Mr. V.
How are you, John? I'm sure that everybody's anxious to know how you're recovering.
Well, I'm recovering. I mean, I feel okay, but I keep testing positive, so I'm still at home.
Well, it's good that you're feeling well. That's something, right?
That's the biggie. That's right.
Exactly right.
Hey, we got a good show today, man. I mean, there's so much to talk about. We got a couple of good people to talk about it with.
Absolutely.
So here they come. Jack Keebler with Keebler Auto and Todd Lassa doing a bunch of freelancing right now, too. Good to have you guys back on the show.
Thanks.
Autoweek. Is that what you're saying, Todd?
Yeah, I've been writing for Autoweek as a contributor the last few months.
Good deal.
Good
Jack,
to see
what are you
John,
up to?
Gary and Jack.
I just have my limited number of regular folks kind of checking in with me on industry happenings. Looks like this has been a wild week.
It has been a wild week.
Been a lot of phone calls.
Yeah, right. I'll bet.
All right, so let's start with what the show was teased for today on Daily, and it was the whole subject of Toyota suddenly seeming to make a shift toward more EVs. Okay, so I'm going to do this a little bit different, guys. So I went to the source of where this all came from. It was a story in Reuters on Monday by Norihiko Shiruzu. And now these are direct quotes from his story. So I want to put this into context before we launch into this. Okay, so quotes. Toyota is considering a reboot of its electric car strategy to better compete in a booming market it has been slow to enter and has halted some work on existing EV projects for people with knowledge of the still developing plans said. A working group within Toyota has been charged with outlining plans by early next year for improvements to its existing EV platform or for a new architecture, the four individuals said. The review was triggered in part by the realization by some Toyota engineers and executives that Toyota was losing the factory cost war to Tesla on EVs, the sources said. Toyota's planning had assumed that demand for EVs would not take off for several decades, the four people said. So the four people said a lot of stuff. What do you three people make of that?
You know, it almost, look, number one, Nori, who broke the story for Reuters, is an excellent reporter. So I put 100% faith in what he's reporting in there. But I wonder also if this was leaked. It sounds to me like there's a debate within Toyota because it was only 2 weeks ago, Akio Toyota, the CEO, was doubling down on, hey, we're going full bore with hybrids. They make a whole lot more sense. And now this story comes out. Was it deliberately leaked to, maybe push a decision within the company? I don't know, but the fact that he reports that some work has already stopped, that's a massive step for Toyota to take.
John, I was going to offer the idea that Akio had actually made his point that I hadn't considered as carefully as he had the number of places in the world where the grid that is used to bring electricity out, not necessarily in as good shape as it is in most of the U.S., although doesn't seem to be terribly good down in Texas these days
or California.
Right.
So Jack, are you suggesting that Akio is basically saying that internal combustion engines have more of a life, therefore making a massive shift would not be good business?
Absolutely right. In fact, I had a conversation, it was probably several months ago now, with one of the professors at the University of Michigan. And she suggested exactly the same thing and, pointed me at things like some of the engine technology that was going on at Mazda. So for lean burn but it was, combustion technology that was very close to carbon neutral.
I think Jack Hollis at the APA a few weeks ago, spoke about how gave the line that Toyota has been giving for years, that they're looking at all kinds of solutions, various things, continuous improvement of ICEs, electrics, hybrid electrics, and
Fuel cell.
Fuel cells, yes, thank you. Fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cells, and I think maybe they're a little bit caught behind what everybody else has been doing, especially GM and Ford, as well as Mercedes-Benz, in terms of making this kind of quick wholesale shift to a concentration on EVs. Toyota had built its reputation on the Prius hybrid of the early aughts, and kind of rested on that for a long time. And I just anecdotally have spoken to several people who are Toyota fans and wonder why, when they're going to have some more EVs on the market. So, I think they kind of got caught behind on that.
I wonder if it's really just the market concentration. I mean, Ford and General Motors, it's almost like they've become no longer as big internationally, much more focused nationally, and the grid in the United States, as fragile as it is in some places that we joked about, it's relatively robust relative to the rest of the world. And so maybe it's their perspective is, hey, the grid is gonna get changes, and the product line that we're going to build for the nation that we serve is going to be EV or battery based versus, again, hybrids or fuel cell.
Yeah, but I don't think that the Toyota thing is, everybody recognizes that in the developing world, it's not going to go EV as fast as the developed world is. I don't think that's the Toyota point. I think part of what Toyota realized is when it looks at what Tesla's doing with gigacastings, for example, with its design change on the fly philosophy, that Tesla's leading the way in designing cost out of EVs. Same strategy that could be applied to ICE in many cases for the same reason. But, if you go back to Norrie's reporting in Reuters, when he says, hey, look, they're talking about stopping development on certain EVs because they have been using this eTNGA platform, which is a modified ICE platform, and they're coming to the realization that they need a clean sheet design. You need to go with a skateboard. You need to dedicate plants to making only EVs if you're going to get the full productivity advantage out of it. And to me, that's the real significance of what's been reported in this, is that Toyota, at least certain executives inside, are talking about slamming on the brakes with what they've done so far and ripping that all up and going clean sheet and doing it right from the get-go.
But is it a stop, John, or is it a pause?
That's unclear.
Okay, so the reporting has it that the guy who's apparently at Toyota, in Toyota City, who's in charge of this program, Shigeki Terashi, and quoting now Norrie again, could also propose to retire eTNGA more quickly and opt for an EV dedicated platform engineered from the ground up. That could take roughly 5 years for new models, two of the sources said. So they're like, stop if they do this.
Isn't that also a GM Ford split? I mean, Ford has said that they don't need to make a dedicated EV platform for its vehicles, whereas GM, of course, has made a big deal out of the Ultium platform, their skateboard.
I think it's not quite that, Todd. I mean, that Blue Oval City that Ford's building down in Tennessee, this massive Rouge-like complex. That's going to be an all-new platform. That's going to be a total skateboard approach. Okay. And if you look at almost every other single legacy automaker, they all made what was seemingly a very logical decision.
Exactly.
Use existing facilities and existing platforms and make the EV transition that way. And now they've all woken up and realized, holy crap, Tesla is so far ahead of us. We can't do this ICE-based platform approach. We got to go clean sheet and bite the bullet. Now listen to that. This guy from Toyota saying it's going to take us 5 years to do it. If you think they're far behind now, they're going to be really far behind by going this. But the other point is, better that you do it right than stick to a strategy that's not working.
Well, but wouldn't they be better off kind of taking the Ford approach and doing using the platform that's throwing out as a stopgap, just like Ford is transitioning from these ICE-based platforms to a dedicated platform?
Sounds like they were going to do that, but what Gary was just reading there is they're going to retire the ETNGA platform sooner than maybe they thought it could take them out to 2030 or something.
Yeah,
like
no,
that.
that's what I mean. I mean, so if they're retiring it earlier, it seems like maybe that shouldn't be the case if they're going to have a gap till the new platform comes out. But maybe that's also an indication that they're going to accelerate the new platform. And
the reality is there is going to be a gap because, I think this week in Automotive News, they were reporting that we're going to need like 10 more lithium mines in the United States, and I don't know how many more cobalt and nickel mines need to be opened up. And the other thing they pointed out is the current permitting process is about 10 years.
Right.
So whether they'll accept the gap or not is irrelevant. There's going to be a gap. And
Okay, but
the other thing that's causing a problem here is everybody is rushing in at once. As long as it was Tesla and a few aggressive players, like let's say General Motors, everything was going to work out fine. And yeah, there would be a little gap, but not a big gap. But I think that the fact that everybody has decided, yep, it's act now or all is lost. Now we've got a problem.
But what we're missing here is Toyota we're making it sound like Toyota is saying we're only going to do hybrids and to hell with EVs, but that's not true because they had said that by 2030, over a third of their global sales would be EVs. So they've been doing this. Okay, there's no question about that. So I think we need to make that clear. And the other thing, and Todd, going back to that Automotive Press Association meeting that Jack Hollis spoke at, Hollis pointed out that it took basically 25 years for hybrids to get 10% of the market. Yeah. And he's saying that he would find it rather astonishing if it's 30%, 40%, 50% by 2030. I think he's a reasonable business guy.
But some of the regulations are pushing us that way. I mean, it's not just activity at the car makers acting independently. Regulations are for like 2030. They're starting to saw off your opportunity in terms of ICE in certain
all
places.
15 or 16 states go the way as California with that, as California.
But that's 2030. That's 2035.
It's 2035, but it's also I forget the exact number, but more than 30% of the market, the U.S. market, is
about 40%
that comply with the California mandate. And one of the things, and actually the competitor that I forgot to mention, none of us has mentioned yet for Toyota, is the one that has scared them for a quarter of a century now, and that's Hyundai and Kia, and they're getting pretty aggressive on a switch to EVs as well. So you can't count.
I'll tell you who else scares Toyota: BYD, NIO, Li Auto, Xpeng. I mean, the Chinese are coming on like gangbusters. And I think they scared Toyota more than Hyundai Kia do.
Well, okay,
when it comes to EVs.
See, but the thing of it is that, okay, if we're saying Toyota's afraid of these guys, I mean, wouldn't Ford and General Motors be more afraid of these guys? Wouldn't Volkswagen be more afraid of these guys? I mean, so before the show, I decided, okay, I'm going to look at the market cap for Toyota, okay? And right now it's $220.93 billion. If I add up General Motors, Ford, and Volkswagen, I come up with 186 billion. Okay, so those three companies are a fraction. Now, of course, Tesla is, insanely at 708 billion. But but I mean, so the thing of it is that I mean, I think these guys are good business people and are basically saying, okay, we're going to do this methodically, and if we have to do it very quickly, then we got the cash, we can do it.
You're right. That amount of money will buy speed. Mm-hmm. And Toyota has always been known as a fast follow company. And, they're very smart at seeing which way the wind is blowing.
And so, again, what year is the new platform expected?
Well, if you had 5 to now, it'd be 2027.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, that's in the hunt. Certainly before the California mandate, and before the 2030, when the competitors are saying that they're going to have a much larger share, that their electrics will be a much larger share of the company. But Jack, you were talking about the about materials and availability of materials and everything. And
Yeah, it was 50 lithium mines, not 10.
well, so I don't know exactly what to make of the fact that both Ford and GM in their Q3 earnings reports this week expressed confidence that they're going to be able to meet those Inflation Reduction Act standards, and Ford even talked about how they'll be able to take advantage of the $45 per kilowatt hour credit that will go to the manufacturers rather than to the customers.
I'm not confident about why Ford feels so confident about their future in this regard, but I mean, GM has gotten lined up on things like lithium availability in Australia. They've bought interests in mining companies to get a hold of lithium. So as far as the supply chain, GM's struggled with that stuff in the past, and they're very aware that is going to be a major issue going forward. And they seem to be, to me at least, pretty well positioned.
See, and this is, I think, one of the things that probably worries Toyota. GM, and you're right, Jack. I think Mary Barra said they've got everything locked up through 2026, no problem. Right. I think Ford has said, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, it's never good, but I think Farley has said they've got like 80% of it already locked up. But now you're Toyota, now you're coming in, and now you're finding, holy crap, everybody's locked everything up.
Yeah, I mean,
whatever extra the others have, which is not going to be anything.
I mean, China is the other major player here that has locked up the supply chain. I mean, most of the world, I think 95% of the world's lithium is processed in China, and right. They've got like 80% of the global supply locked up for China companies. So, I mean, what a great long vision strategy for taking on the electric the EV market. Everybody else, including GM, which I just sort of celebrated a little bit, they all seem a little bit behind the Chinese.
I have to say I'm not sure that automakers doing business in North America have to worry about the Chinese yet. I mean, there are all kinds of geopolitical issues that could
and the IRA
murky. On top of the fact that look how long we've been watching Chinese companies come into the Detroit Auto Show and say, "Hey, we're going to be here in 2 years."
That's right.
But well, Jack, you mentioned they've just decided that now is not the right political climate for them to be coming into the U.S. market. But, and probably the state-owned ones like BAIC and SAIC and Chang'an, I doubt they're ever going to get in here. But the independent ones like BYD and Great Wall and Chery and the like could absolutely get into the U.S. market.
Well, and let's not forget they're moving into Europe.
Geely had a pretty aggressive program here, and I think that's been dismantled basically.
Right,
but I mean,
Volvos, but
well, this Inflation Reduction Act though doesn't it requires the vehicles to be built in the U.S.
in North
America, and some significant part of the battery material needs to come from North America.
Right,
a very large part.
Or for countries with which we have a free trade agreement.
Okay.
Right. So it starts out at roughly 50% of the materials have got to be sourced in the U.S. or with free trade partners, and that goes up every single year until the end of 2029. It's got to be 100%.
I heard that caused some hiccups down in the with Hyundai at their new Meta plant. They were like, "Hey, we made our announcement. We were putting this plan in, and all of a sudden there are new rules and regulations." It's like you're changing the rules of the game while we're playing.
But I keep pointing out it would be unrealistic to expect Congress. And remember, there wasn't a Republican vote in the IRA; it was strictly through the Democrats.
Yeah.
It was unrealistic for them to come out and pass a piece of legislation that's going to give American taxpayer money to foreign companies with cars that are being imported. That was never going to happen. So, and this whole battery thing I keep pointing out has got serious national security implications to it, because it was Bob Gallion from CATL that pointed this out to me, that when we drop our war fighters into a combat zone, they have something like 18 pounds of batteries in their gear, for communication devices, night vision systems, and the like. And as he put it to me, he says, where do you think most of those batteries come from? So there's a real need for the U.S. to be able to have its own source of, lightweight lithium advanced batteries. And so Congress at least got this moved through. And like I said, it was going to be unrealistic for them to provide money to foreign automakers building cars overseas. That was never going to happen.
Well, if you look at the timeline, we're at 2022 now. And like I said, 10 years with the permitting process, although everybody's screaming about speeding the permitting process up and changing the regulations. We're out at 2032 before a lot of those mines come online and start to get aligned with what the demand's going to be. So I don't know. Akio made a lot of sense when he said, hey, maybe we need to slow down a little bit. But, the problem is, although he's making sense, nobody else is using common sense. Everybody else is rushing in.
Carlos Tavares at Stellantis is saying essentially the same thing. And so is Zipsa at BMW.
Yep. BMW, yeah.
Well, and Gary and I discussed this earlier this morning. There was a UN report about how carbon emissions have to come down 45% by 2030 to have any effect on reversing climate change. And it's currently at looking about 1% reduction in that time. And you have, at this point, you have to kind of take it outside of the automotive world and see what does the rest of the world think when they look at all this happening. They just, those who are concerned about climate change will say, I don't care. We need these electric cars right away. We need them yesterday. And then, of course, you have a large portion of the population who say, no, that's BS. We don't need it. So it's a struggle outside the auto world that's not going to make it any easier for what the automotive industry is doing.
Well, what do you guys? I was just going to ask you, what do you think about plug-in hybrids? Because I didn't realize this before, but the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, that 50% goal by 2030 includes plug-in hybrids, which I was not aware of. And, I think we've all thought all along that that's the perfect bridge technology.
Well, California is going to adjust its rules, or it's thought that they'd adjust their rules also to make PHEVs part of the regimen and not completely ban ICEs entirely.
Right. And I think I think they're going to require a minimum of 50 or 60 miles of pure electric drive for a PHEV to qualify.
Right. And so then this gets back to the whole Toyota strategy of saying, okay, so we'll just increase marginally the size of the battery that we have within our PHEVs, and therefore, didn't Hollis say something along the lines of, like, for a PHEV that you only need like a third of the battery that you need for an electric vehicle, therefore you could make 3 of those for every single full EV.
Yeah, and Akio pointed out you can build 8 hybrid electric vehicles with the same battery material used for one battery EV that has a 320-mile range. So that's a lot of cleanup. And I mean, it's not as glamorous or as dramatic as the BEV, but it gets the job done, and that's the point.
So to that point, Jack, I mean, so I was looking at the sales through Q3, and Toyota in the United States sold 378,357 hybrids. Okay, so this is from Corolla hybrids to Lexus hybrids. They've got almost every vehicle has a hybrid. Okay, so that's nearly 400,000. So then I looked at General Motors' sale of electric vehicles, and so this would be 36 Lyrics, 22,000 bolts, and 782 Hummers for a grand total of 22,830. Okay, so
who's
not,
providing the bigger cleanup?
not even a tenth. Yeah.
and yet they look good. They look good. They look good.
Well, but
It's
so
got-
you
it's
take
got
a
star
gym
quality.
where you multiply it by 8, and then you can see how that battery ratio works out between hybrids and
I mean,
full-
you know, the other thing we haven't even talked about in regard to the grid is where is the electricity coming from? Is it oil? Is it coal? Is it renewables? Is it wind? Is it wave? Is it geothermal? I mean, that makes a big difference in terms
All
of
of the-
cleanup too. Well,
Yeah.
right now that's true. That's right. That's
But,
right.
you know-
and largely coal.
it all comes
Yeah,
down
but-
to that 45% reduction is never going to happen. So, you know.
Right.
Yeah, but think
Okay.
about it. You know, if you've got an 18-gallon gas tank, you're putting about 600 kilowatt hours. You're pumping 600 kilowatt hours into that thing. Whereas with an EV, you know, where are they settling in now? Something like 70 kilowatt hours is a very typical battery size.
Right.
So compare the CO2 emissions of 600 kilowatt hours of gasoline to 70 kilowatt hours of coal, even if it ran on pure coal, which really no part of the grid does. It's a blend of all the inputs. So I would say even if it's even theoretically running on purely coal, it's still going to be far cleaner than something that's burning gasoline.
It is, and the cleanup at the plants, it's not like a steam engine burning coal. I mean, they have pretty good scrubbing at the plant. So, to your point,
But not for
John.
greenhouse gases.
Um,
It's still CO2
no,
coming
but
out,
oxides of nitrogen, carbon monoxide, that stuff.
sulfur dioxide, all that stuff.
Sulfur
They scrub that
dioxide,
out
right.
pretty well. That's true, but not CO2.
Right.
So to go back to, you know, Jack, you were mentioning about the, you know, the issue of the materials for the batteries and so on. And Todd, I read your story in Autoweek about the General Motors earnings. And one of the points that you made in there was that Mary Barra had said previously that they were going to be building 400,000 electric vehicles from,
Middle of 2023,
but
North
they pushed
America
it.
to the end
but
of
they
20
pushed it back.
They
Right?
pushed it.
It's
right.
end of 2024 now.
I thought
I
mid 24.
thought she said first half of 2024.
Yeah.
And she blamed that on
Right.
you know,
That's true. That's right. That's right.
And you know, so the question, of course, is that really going to happen, or are we going to get to January of 2024 and they say, or whenever they do the first quarter report in 2024, like March or April, and they'll say, well, maybe 2025 now. You know, who knows?
But I mean, do you think that I mean, she said it was a battery manufacturing issue. I mean, was this the fact that the plant that they're doing that they have up with LG doesn't have the capacity, or they thought they'd make more, or do you have any sense of that?
Yeah, I think it was. It was again. I was just in listening mode in the Q3 call, but I think it had to do with getting supply issues to that plant and supplies to that plant, and you know.
My read was it was taking longer to get this thing up to line speed than they thought it would.
Well,
Which happens all the time.
Yeah.
These are the realities of manufacturing. You know, people, you know, they have a goal, they have a target, and it slips.
So you don't think that they just needed to like dig some mines in Ohio to be able to get raw materials?
Do you know about some lithium deposits in Ohio that I don't know about?
Hey, I will say this, you know, this year alone so far, the U.S. has reopened 2 lithium mines and is on the verge of opening a manganese mine and a cobalt mine. Now, it's not nearly enough to solve the problem, but we're starting to move pretty fast, far faster than I thought that we would.
Money's a motivator. All those
And
customers in
legislation.
line, right?
Hey, look.
Yeah,
this is
the
probably-
mine is in Idaho, the one that exists, and then there's another one in like the Carolinas.
For lithium, it's California and there's the Carolinas. And then I'll get them mixed up. Manganese and cobalt. it was like Nevada and Idaho, but I can't remember which is which.
Funny you mentioning money as a motivator, Jack. One other kind of interesting point made during the Ford Q3 call yesterday afternoon or evening. Jim Farley touted the fact that this IRA, the
Inflation Reduction Act.
I want to say investment. Also applies to commercial buyers, and we've seen Ford shifting a lot of its business, maybe not shifting it, but emphasizing more its commercial business.
Definitely.
Last decade or so, and he was pretty happy about the fact that not only would automakers get $45 per kilowatt hour for as their incentive, and then the consumer incentive $7,500 tops, but also that that companies would have incentives to buy EV commercial vehicles. The Walmarts and the FedExes of the world who are buying these electric.
Right, Volvo, Freightliner, that stuff.
And remember, for commercial trucks, it's $40,000, not $7,500. Now, I don't think that applies to an e-transit van. But,
well, the trucks cost $400,000 a piece, John.
They do. I realize that. But there's also all kinds of money for putting in charging systems in a marshalling yard and things like that.
It's expensive.
Yeah. Hey, look,
Yeah,
let's take a quick commercial break. I know Gary's got some other really good topics for us to get into.
Yep.
So, guys, let's go for the break right now.
How do Bridgestone tires stop shorter on what roads? It's their HydroTrack technology. But you don't have to know how the science works, just where the brake is. What really matters is their Bridgestone.
The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. No matter what the mode of transportation, there is always the need for an efficient propulsion system. And that's exactly what BorgWarner has been doing since the earliest days of the automotive industry.
Thank you, Bridgestone, and thank you, BorgWarner.
So moving back to Ford and what was stated by Mr. Farley yesterday in the call, and this I find to be somewhat curious, and maybe you guys can explain it to me. So Jim Farley said, and I quote, "But things have changed. There's a huge opportunity right now for Ford to give time, the most valuable commodity in modern life,
I saw that,
back to millions of customers while they're in their vehicles. It's mission critical for Ford to develop great and differentiated L2 Plus and L3 applications that at the same time make transportation even safer." Okay, so basically, this was in relation to Argo AI, of which Ford owned 39%, and Volkswagen owning 39%, going away. And they admitted that that they had projected that in 2021 there would be commercially available production volume autonomous vehicles rolling around. And now they're like, well, we're optimistic about that future, but we don't need to do it. So, I mean, so what's your take on this?
Again, this is one of those situations where you set a target, and everybody drives towards it, and my understanding about the issue is that the price of the sensors has never gone down. I mean, it's gone down, but it hasn't gone down as quickly as they had hoped it would. So the price is still too high to go into mass production of self-driving cars.
Yeah. So Farley basically said that we've got L2 Plus and L3 well along, and that gives the driver the ability to cross country and not. Or at least be on the freeway and not have his or her hands on the wheel all the time, but that to go to L4 to bring that value to the customer, we're not going to make any money out of that. That they're not going to pay any extra for the L4 versus the L3 and the L2 Plus. And so the other interesting point of that to me, I think, was I thought of Microsoft and Ford some 12 or 15 years ago, going in big on My Ford Plus, the interactive system where the hands-off thing where you could just take 3 voice commands to change your radio station that you could otherwise do by turning the dial, and and that was pretty much a mess for the first few years. And there were all sorts of stories about how Ford engineers and Microsoft engineers were, not getting along in terms of who is really in charge here. And I wonder if there was a little bit of that between Argo AI and Ford and Volkswagen. Ford says it's going to continue to develop what do they call the L2 Plus and the L3
ADAS,
the in-house
assistance systems.
Yeah, in-house. Well, they got a name for it.
Ford Blue Cruise and Lincoln Active Glide.
There you go. They're going to do that. That's all being done in-house. They're going to hire some of the Argo techies, not all of them, and do that in-house rather than farm it out to Argo AI and have another My Ford Plus on their hands.
I think
couldn't they just buy it from Bosch? I mean, I don't understand this.
Yeah, no, that's probably what they're going to end up doing down the road at some point. But I think what happened is Argo AI ran out of money, and Ford and Volkswagen said, "Hey, look, we got to build all these EVs. We don't have another $1 billion to throw in your lap." Yeah. And Argo, because the tech sector has tanked, everybody has got SPAC-itis now. They don't want to touch a SPAC. It couldn't raise any more money, and they had to close up shop. It came down to it's that simple. But if they didn't have any revenue coming in to speak of. GM claims it's going to start to ramp up Cruise over the next year. Waymo is starting to expand to other cities. If you look at what's going on in China, Baidu is going from city to city to city already. And Jack, getting to the point there, they claim that the cost of their AV is $36,000 for the whole car, sensor suite, everything.
Wow.
So now I don't know how level 4 their thing is. It seems to me they're running milk routes, not just on demand, take me wherever within a geofenced area, which helps keep the cost down. But still, if these other companies are able to make it, they've cornered the market. They got it to themselves.
Well, but let's not forget, Aurora has said, that Chris Urmson came out, what was it, last month, and basically saying, well, guys, things are not looking so good, and maybe we'll have to sell ourselves to another company.
Right. They can't get money.
But I mean, so you think about it, Brian Slasky, who starts Argo AI, Chris Urmson, who starts Aurora. I mean, these are 2 of the smartest automated driving people on the planet. I mean, there's no disputing that those guys, and they can't make it with the backing of the likes of Volkswagen and Ford. I mean,
well, I guess they're not as smart as
$4 billion only goes so far, Gary.
They're not as smart as Elon Musk, who is under investigation for it. That is, Tesla is on the Justice Department issue.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is going to trigger some serious questions from Wall Street to Mary Barra and Elon Musk. Elon is selling this $15,000 full self-driving thing that, I mean, people are paying for it, but so much of the company's valuation is marked on the fact that they're expecting many more people to spend that kind of money because those people will see an economic benefit to themselves as they put their car into the Robotaxi fleet. Well, if that's not going to happen, Tesla's valuation doesn't look so good. And same questions will be put to Mary Barra. Okay, you keep talking about this. When can we as shareholders expect a payoff?
So Jack, to your point, so far Cruise has lost $1.4 billion this year. Okay. Yep. And there's time to go. So
if you remember, they were talking about taking that public earlier. I think it was like last year or something. And the guy that was doing that is no longer with the company.
Was it Dan Amon?
Dan Amon. And Mary's hung on, but at some point somebody's going to start to question that, particularly after the debacle that happened this week with Argo and Ford and Volkswagen. Volkswagen isn't completely walking away from this either. I mean, I think things are going to go a little bit more underground, if you will, because I mean, VW just took a stake in a Chinese company called Horizon Robotics, and a 60% stake. And so I think they're going to continue to work on this. And they do see a future for this kind of stuff in China, where I don't think there's quite as much liability in China as there is, say, in North America.
Nowhere near as much liability, I'm sure. I mean, it's interesting how, a few years ago, everybody was talking about how AVs and EVs go together, and maybe they go together too well in terms of burning up cash. So,
well, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because you say they go together. The problem with AV and EV together is that AV consumes an enormous amount of power. And so, I started to wonder at some point. I visited Argo a while ago, and when you looked at the size of the cooling system in the vehicle and the fact that the entire trunk of these Ford Focuses was filled with electronic gear, I thought to myself, if this thing was powered by electricity, what kind of a change in the range of the vehicle would that make? I mean, I was thinking a third or something maybe greater than that in terms of decreased range because of your powering all this equipment. Because they were certainly producing an awful lot of heat. They needed a huge cooling system to keep all those electronics from frying themselves. So that's a lot of power. So I don't know whether they go together or not. I think maybe an internal combustion engine and AV might go together a little bit better.
I think it had more to do with the fact that they were being developed kind of along the same timelines, if you will. So,
They did kind of. There was like a confluence there for a little while. Yeah.
But it was a bigger argument back in 2019, especially Ford versus GM. Ford was saying you got to go hybrid or internal combustion engine for an AV.
That's
GM
right.
said nope, we're going to go electric. But I think this is why everybody that survived so far is talking Robotaxi. They're not talking about putting these things in showrooms and retailing them. They're talking about getting superb, they hope, uptime usage. Because as you guys know, the average car is used 2 to 3% a day. It sits there 98% of the time unused. Well, if you can flip that around, all of a sudden, the Robotaxi becomes a real moneymaker.
That's assuming, John, but I remember years ago you were talking about even the bearings that are used for things like taxi cabs in days of yore were capacitized to be able to have a higher duty cycle than normal vehicles do. So in order to make those things, that costs more money. In order to have the electrification or whatever the powertrain system would be. I mean, because I think the Cruise origins are EVs, right? They're using the Ultium platform.
Yeah.
So you have that, and then, which is more money. And then on top of that, you have all these sensors, which is even more money. So you have this enormous price. And then, oh yeah, by the way, people don't want to climb in with other people anymore because of COVID. So where's all this money going to come from?
And meanwhile, the IRA says the cars should cost $55,000 and the trucks should cost no more than $80,000. So, at the same time that we're, putting all this technology into the vehicle and pushing the price up, legislators write some legislation that says the cars can't cost any more than $55,000 or $80,000. So. Well, we've got a lot of conflicting elements going on here right now.
Look, the key is going to be to watch GM Cruise, and because they've been talking about expanding outside of San Francisco. So where do they go? How fast do they go? How many cities do they go to? How fast? That's going to be the real key to say whether or not this whole AV thing is going to work, at least in this country.
Yeah, Austin and Phoenix were added this week, or mentioned this week as being added.
All right, so John.
But you guys follow the fact that Cruise had some issues about, 9 months ago? They had a bunch of vehicles stuck in an intersection in the middle of the night because a server went down or something. So, it's like full speed ahead, even though we're having all these problems. So,
full speed ahead until you have to reboot. Yeah.
To John's earlier point, I think it's going to be really worthwhile keeping an eye on Cruise to see what happens over the next, even just 6 months.
So, okay, John, do you think that they'll have $1 billion in revenue by 2025?
I think that's pretty ambitious. I think that's pretty ambitious. But I don't know. I mean, look, if you listen to them, if they can scale, and not just in the U.S., by the way, I mean, they're talking about taking GM Cruise globally, then yeah, maybe it can happen. But, you know, to Jack's point, I think I'll give them 12 months. I think the next 6 to 12 months is really going to make it or break it.
You know, there was another thing that came out in the Ford presentation, and this is something, John, that you've talked about a lot, and I find it interesting that this is like out in the world. They're saying this. They're saying by 2028, the company expects to have more than 30 million connected vehicles on the road around the globe, each of them representing a potential new value for customers and annuity-like software as a service revenue for Ford. So, I mean, it seems like the whole objective here is like, let's get these cars all connected so we can sell them more stuff.
Absolutely. You know, as we've talked about on the show, the legacy automakers are not growing. If you look at how much money they brought in a decade ago, GM and Ford have actually shrunk. BMW and Honda have really not grown at all. Mercedes and Toyota have barely grown much. And so they're all desperate. How do you grow your top line? Because this is why their stock prices stink. And this is why Tesla's stock price, you know, recent history not included, but why it's been growing like crazy, because Tesla's been growing at like 50% a year. And the rest of them, you know, are barely growing or not growing at all or even shrinking. So how do you get more money? They're pinning their futures on these subscription services.
So it's no longer just the mats.
Or undercoating.
Yes.
That's right.
Well, you know, it hasn't been the mats. I mean, you know, they've been talking about in the nav systems, you know, the nav systems telling you, oh, you've been driving for 6 hours. Don't you think it's time to stop for a Starbucks? You know, and they've been working on that for a while too, and it's just like, don't want it.
Well, Gary, what did Ford say? They have something like 83,000 customers who are paying for Ford Blue Cruise and Active Glide.
83,000 vehicle owners.
And I don't know what they're charging on a monthly basis for that now, but it's starting to happen.
So do you guys think that consumers will be ready to pay, you know, more for their L2 Plus and for Netflix and for Spotify and for et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Jack, you're shaking your head. The people who are listening on the pod,
no.
people on the podcast can't see you or hear you shake your head.
Do you remember? Was it BMW that was going to charge for what was it, John?
Heated seats, heated
seats. I mean, the outcry. So, I mean, the idea that you're going to, I haven't heard anything yet that made me hungry. In other words, I haven't heard anything yet, some extra thing that's coming along that I'm going to get that I really want to pay a lot of extra money for. Maybe a little bit of extra money, but I don't know.
Not a cheapskate like me.
You know, right. and that's a good point, John, is that, you know, the new cars and trucks, brand new cars and trucks are already pretty much out of the reach of middle-class Americans. And it's just heading further north. And, you know, the one thing California hasn't counted on for 2035 is how many of its citizens will be buying 3-year-old off-lease Audis in 2035 that are still gas-powered. I mean, that's the way it's going to be.
What is the current ATP? Does anybody have an idea? Is it like 46,000 or something?
46 to 48, somewhere. I mean,
it really climbed up there over the last couple of years too.
And you know, it's also very much like everything else you buy online these days. You have to be careful you're not signing up for an automatic renewal and realize you've been paying you know, $12 a month for a Netflix subscription you haven't watched in 2 years.
Right.
But you know, your point about
not that I know anything about that, but you know, it's that's what it comes down to. And
Todd,
that's what the automakers are trying to do too.
Todd, your point about used cars is really good because that's the other thing that they're looking for. They sell a car and it's sayonara, it's goodbye. That car is gone forever. But if they can get people to pay subscription services for things, they can collect revenue on used cars. And the average car is over 12 years old now. I mean, so you don't get the MSRP and it's done. You could conceivably, this is what they're dreaming of, collect revenue for 12 years until the thing's scrapped.
Exactly, John. And wouldn't it make sense for them to stay the owner of the vehicle, particularly if they want to get these battery materials back while it's scarce?
So you're saying the OEM owns the vehicle and the purchaser simply has got a lease or is basically renting it?
Doesn't VinFast, haven't they already suggested they're going to own the battery or they're going to lease you the battery or something like that?
You can buy it or you can wrap it into a deal whereby you do the swapping. So
again,
you've got a choice.
I think until these 50 mines, come online, I think they're going to want to recover those batteries, and they're going to recover all that material. And particularly as the recycling methods get better and they're able to recover a larger percentage of the total battery, they're at the very least going to want the battery back, even if they don't want the whole car back. And actually, they get the whole car back anyway, because a car is one of the most highly recycled consumer products there is. It's something like 95% of the car comes back, except for some shredder fluff, which is just glass and some fabric or something.
Hey, honey, I'm going to. I've got to recycle some beer cans and soda bottles, and I'm going to pick up a new battery while I'm there.
But Jack,
you're joking. That could happen.
No, I'm actually not joking. I'm not. That's
so you're talking about the average price of a vehicle, and this sort of goes back to what we were talking about before, the EVs and Toyota. According to Kelley Blue Book, the average price for an electric vehicle, $65,291.
Wow.
So if you're Jack Hollis, do you say to yourself, gee, do I want to sell a whole bunch of $25,000 Priuses, or do I want to wait for somebody to buy one of these cars?
I don't know if the Priuses are that low anymore either. I think they're probably in the 30s, aren't they?
Well, wasn't there some discussion recently, though, that Elon Musk was talking about a $25,000 version of a Tesla, and that some of the, to your point, John, about manufacturing methods, that some of it, that they were going to drive the cost down to 50% of what the cost is now?
Right. He's talking about an all-new platform and taking the lessons learned, and which I've been talking about, of how they do design changes on the fly, which nobody else in the industry does.
Right.
And the reason they do that is they're taking cost out far faster than anybody and or adding value. So that's what's so intriguing about Tesla to me is, it's changing the rules of the game in so many ways. It's not just they have a sexy, fast car that people want. You got to dig deeper. They're changing how you design them, how you engineer them, how you manufacture them, obviously how you retail them as well. And that's the big impact. And that's why I think Tesla or Toyota is starting to rethink its strategy.
It's John, it's interesting you mentioned all these changes that they're making the vehicle on the fly, because it's not obvious to the consumer. If you look at it on the outside, these vehicles look very similar to when they were originally produced.
That's right.
But you're right. The interior architectures have changed significantly. The heating systems, the batteries, everything's changed. Well, and yet the outside.
And that's a strategy that Ford has picked up on when Farley actually in the previous quarter, the second quarter report spoke about how they would, they thought the future would be to not redesign a body shell every 5 years, but to do all the redesign on the software and on the untouchables, if you will. So
are the consumers there though, Todd? Are the consumers there for like, you're not going to make my brand new car look new, but you're going to change everything inside the car?
Well, it's a Ford thing. It's like it's like Henry wanted to make the Model T well into the 30s and until
that didn't work out.
Sloan's Sloan's
think about that. Think about that. Ford lost its #1 position in the world because they stuck with the unchanged Model T for too long. Unchanged visually, but
right.
Making improvements.
Drove the cost down.
So we had
Yeah.
John Smith, ex-head of Cadillac, on last week, and that was one of the points he was making, that at some point, Tesla's going to have to change its styling. It's going to have to update it. So far, their strategy has worked brilliantly. In fact, we had Tom Libby on earlier in the year, and he pointed out that the Model Y, at least in May, he was citing figures from May of this year, 76% owner loyalty. I mean,
Wow.
Nobody gets that kind of, if you get 50%, you're doing really well. 76% is, just crazy. And these are people who are trading in their Model Ys and going for another one that looks exactly the same. Why are they doing? They want the gigacastings. They want the latest electronic architecture. They're hoping they got the 4680 batteries in it, whatever. Now, so far, like I said, it's worked. As Tesla starts to grow and grow and grow and goes beyond, the acolytes for EVs, we'll have to see if that strategy holds. I personally think they're going to have to do styling updates.
I think the key is that they'll use the Cybertruck as its new signature design. I mean, and I'm kind of serious, because if you think about it, you start making Model 3s and Model Ys with flat body panels, you stamp very easily. Why not?
Don't even have to stamp them.
Just get a press brake.
That's right.
That's right. Just have a robot arm just operating it.
I remember,
but
we
the
had
thing is,
on it. Go ahead, Gary. Sorry.
I was saying, okay, but John, from what about these people who are buying Teslas and buying more Teslas, and I mean, do you guys think that there are a sufficient number of people who have bought vehicles from the traditional OEMs that have that same sort of loyalty and be willing to, accept, some of the changes that Tesla does or does not make? I mean, the last I heard that, General Motors wasn't on federal investigation for something it was offering, as Tesla is. So
I don't have a crystal ball right now, but they're in the luxury market right now. Tesla's ahead of the next competitor, which is either Mercedes or BMW, by 100,000 units in North America, more than 100,000 units. So, I mean, so far, so good. Whether that continues, I really need the crystal ball.
What do you think, Todd?
I like John Smith's idea. Sooner or later, they're going to have to change.
I think, to your point, Gary, we've spoken about how Tesla owners, loyal Tesla owners, are like the early Mac people, that they're just not going to change. They're not, no matter how good a GM or Ford or Mercedes-Benz electric is, a certain component of those will not change. On the other hand, I have to say that we got a friend from the dog park who drives a Tesla Model Y, and when I showed him pictures of the Cadillac Lyric we saw at a party back in Dream Cruise weekend, he said, "Yeah, that might be my next car." So, there may be, that may be a bit overstated. I think as the EV universe expands, and there'll be lots of different choices and lots of different ways to approach how you design and redesign these vehicles. You're going to have new buyers, younger buyers, getting to the age and income level where they can buy some of these cars or trucks, and it's going to be different. Maybe the kids of Tesla owners never want to drive what their parents drive.
Right.
That's usually how it goes.
That's the oldest shibboleth in auto marketing, isn't it?
It is. It is.
But I mean, do you go from a Tesla to a Celestiq? Do you go from a Tesla, $100,000 Tesla to a $300,000 Celestiq?
Maybe go from a Tesla to a Chevy Bolt or a Hyundai Ioniq. Maybe you say, my car doesn't need to be as big a portion of my income as it was in 2022. That might be one way to look at it too. I don't know.
And probably what they'll do is go from a $68,000 Model Y to a $62,000 Cadillac Lyric, not the Celestiq.
I would downgrade personally. I would downgrade the car and spend the extra $12,000 on a Pinarello F12 bicycle. So, if you want to split up your money that way, that's one way to go. And that bike doesn't need any coal-powered electricity to run.
And
Come on, Todd. You're a car guy. Let's not hear that.
I'm a car guy, but
let's not hear that heresy.
Okay, all right. I know that's heresy, but
pedal power stuff.
I think we're getting to a point too where beside the shift to EVs, we're getting a bit more of an expanded transportation universe, even in the United States. You have cities being changed where some of the high-rise highways going through towns that were built for not very good reasons, actually 50, 60, 70 years ago, are coming down. And, there's plenty of space for cars in this country in between cities, but city driving, to sit in traffic, whether the car is driving itself or not, is not that much fun. I'd rather save the car for the weekend.
How about a compromise, Todd? Maybe an e-bike.
Donna has one.
Too dangerous for you.
I'll pedal for as long as I can myself, but that's just me.
All right, so I want to do a final thing, and these are numbers that I've been thinking a lot about, and maybe you guys can make some sense of what this represents and whether this is why there seems to be so much interest among the traditional OEMs for things like EVs and AVs and so on. So this research organization Statica did a survey, and it was started the summer of 21 to the summer of 22, and they asked non-car owners around the world whether they would plan to buy a car. 33% in the United States, 18% in Germany, 6% in Japan. So how does that bode if you're in the car manufacturing business?
What you're saying, they said they would not buy a car?
So only 6% of people who don't own a car in Japan are going to buy a car or plan to buy a car. 33% of those in the United States who don't own one would plan to buy a car, and 18% in Germany. So I just picked those three since, representative. And I mean, it just seems to me that maybe a lot of this activity is to say, hey, we've got this cool novelty. You want to be a part of this novelty because people like that sort of thing, right? And so, the rest of them are like Todd, they're, willing to spend the money on bicycles. And
I don't have that kind of money. Believe me, I'm not going to buy a Pirelli.
$12,000 bicycle? Whoop.
No. I guess, this gets back to, again, 10 or 12 years ago when there was a lot of hand wringing in Detroit about how, even sons and daughters of auto engineers and executives were not interested in getting a driver's license at 16. I'm not anti-car by any means. I just think that the way the world is turning right now, and especially with cars becoming so expensive in the United States alone, that we're going to have a different mix, and cars are probably, not so much for the cities. If you think about Tokyo, let alone Japan, that 6% makes a heck of a lot of sense, doesn't it? Getting around in Tokyo not by car is probably a lot easier than getting around by car these days. We've had,
and I mean, you didn't even mention Uber and Lyft.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the generation that really exercise those opportunities.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the future of those two myself, but again, the pandemic might shift that back because nobody wants to get on the public transportation anymore either. But
right, not without a mask on.
I don't know. Have you been to an airport lately? You been on an airplane lately? People,
no, I haven't.
They're not worried about it all getting together.
Yeah,
that's true.
But yeah. The auto universe, the number of manufacturers and brands and so on has been expanding for 25 or 30 years, and some European brands have come back to the U.S. and it's a global market everywhere now. There are a lot of brands and models, and I feel like, and I'm not saying I'm for or against this, but I feel like the future, the next 10 or 15 years, we're going to see some of that culled. We're going to see some of those brands and some of those models go away, and maybe a little more simplicity. And it maybe the Tesla model that John's talking about, that's changing things, that might do that, because they don't have a huge range of models. And
so who are you talking about, Todd? Like the Alphas and the Jaguars of the world, or what?
yeah,
Lotus?
yeah. I mean,
Tiny numbers.
yeah, or I mean, I could see a point too where the big automakers don't have to be in every segment anymore. I mean, you see, we talked about Ford, really concentrating on commercial vehicles, and if you look at the sales numbers of even their SUVs over the last 10 or 15 years or so, they're not grabbing the number one spaces like the Ford Explorer used to, especially with some Kias and Hyundais coming on board and challenging them.
Right.
And maybe Ford is Mustang and pickup trucks and vans in the future. I know that, and Lincoln, because that's a moneymaker. But maybe that's what we're headed to, is that we'll have a little bit more specialization among those brands. Maybe Alpha will still be around, but it would have one or two models mixed in with everything else Stellantis does.
Hey, this is probably a good time to wrap up. So, Jack and Todd, thanks so much for coming on. Great discussion here today.
Thanks for having us.
And Gary, thanks for the topics. Really good stuff.
Yes.
And we'll
so
do
thanks,
this next
everybody,
week.
for having tuned in, and we'll be back here again next week.
Thank you.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey, and by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
If you like this program and would like to learn more about the automotive industry, check out our website at autoline.tv or look for us on YouTube on the Autoline channel.